retweeting, getting everything all set up on the interwebs and the social medias. I hope you're all having a lovely Monday morning. I'm sipping on some coffee right now to turn this over into an ASMR style event. Good morning. We are live. Another Monday morning tech chat coming your way on the SGGQA podcast. Again, this is our attempts to get our tech week started off right, taking a look at some news stories and also revisiting some stories over the last week and over the weekend. We might want to spend a little extra time on unraveling everything, really talking about what it is that we're getting into. I'm already seeing some people pop up in the live chats. Of course, we're streaming on Periscope, Twitch, and YouTube. I see Christian says my image looks good. Thank you very much, Christian, on the Periscopes. I'm seeing Damir, Nicholas, Andrew Wallace. All of you, very good morning, coming at you from a very overcast day in Southern California. An overcast day that I am very upset to be having right now. Normally, I love a little bit of weather in California, some cloud coverage for a couple days. Really, really nice. Chatty boy, what's up on Periscope? How you doing, sir? And Alex Morgan, hey, thanks for joining the SGGQA Monday morning tech chat. But no, I'm a little bummed that I've got morning cloudiness right now because I'm smack dab in the middle of my camera review for the LG G7, and I need some daylight for that because I do all of my real world testing out in bright, sunny Southern California conditions. And I might not be able to shoot today, which is going to push this camera review back even further. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the G7, some of the pricing estimates that are coming out for this phone, especially as it's going to arrive at T-Mobile. And I want to share a couple thoughts with having used this phone for about 2 weeks now, because I think there's something kind of interesting in what LG is doing here. But outside of that little bit of housekeeping, of course, this is, can you give me this set from Rabui? I like my Christmas light set. Unfortunately, I think it's just going to stay in my office. Outside of that little bit of housekeeping, I've got some videos coming up that I'm going to be really excited about. Some more audio recording equipment that's going to be on the main YouTube channel. And of course, I also have to give the plug every week, Thursdays, 10 a.m. Pacific time. You can catch me and Trisha Hirschberger on Newegg Now. So newegg.com/newegg now. And that's where we talk about all of the cool gaming PC and hardware and tech and stuff. Recently on my own personal YouTube channel, I spent some time wrapping up my experiences with the Honor View 10, not the Honor 10. That's the new one. The View 10, I did a long-term review, so you can catch that, see my experiences working with this premium mid-ranger. Some of that video is already proven to be completely obsolete because we just had the announcement on the OnePlus 6. We spent a lot of time talking about that on the Board at Work podcast and the Pocket Now podcast, and we should probably mention a little bit of it here. Again, the excitement of seeing another proper premium mid-ranger join the market. It's hilarious that years ago, not that many years ago, a $500 phone would have been a laughably expensive pocket gadget to have. And now that's smack dab in the middle of the market. So again, some excitement to see that OnePlus didn't go full-on premium flagship. It's not a $600, $700, $800 phone, but $529 is no small chunk of change to be throwing at a smartphone these days. And I'd be curious. I'll be curious to see what you all have to say about it. Do you think that this price creep is in keeping with the rest of the market? Do you think that this is really in keeping with the OnePlus mission of trying to deliver top tier performance but at a more competitive price point? I'm interested because this is one of those conversations I've been trying to have. So many people are going out there and essentially leasing their phone now, where you never really pay off your phone. By the time you're getting close to paying it off, you're probably going to want to replace it. So you just go with another payment plan. And then over those 2 years, those phones have gotten just that little bit more expensive. So, it's no big deal. It's going to cost me $2 extra a month. So I'll just tack that onto my bill. And then you just never really stop paying for your phone. I don't know. I think there's a really solid argument to be made for just throwing down $500 up front and getting something which covers 85% of what you would want from an iPhone or a Galaxy, and then hopefully running that into the ground for 2.5 years. This is from Chad Lynch. Are we getting a OnePlus 6 camera review? I will be producing a OnePlus 6 camera review. I'm hoping to get a OnePlus 6 this week, so we'll see. We'll see if that comes through. I'm no longer a big deal. No one really cares about me, so I have to fight a little bit harder to get gadgets and get phones and stuff like that. So I'm hoping to continue producing on that, but I'm pretty confident I'll be making the play there. I'm really curious to check it out. I've always liked this mid tier performer. Like phones in the $300 to $500 category offer up some great benefits for consumers, and I always think it's kind of frustrating when we put an Axon 7, a OnePlus 6, an Honor 10, an Honor View 10 up against phones that cost $200 to $400 more expensive, and then you'll hear people complain like, "Oh, camera's just not good enough. It's not. I mean, camera could be better." And you're like, "Well, no, the camera is actually amazing for a $500 phone or $400 phone." And we were talking about the Axon 7. The Axon 7 camera was incredible for a $400 phone at a time where Galaxy phones were coming in $650 to $700. That camera performed admirably. And same thing, OnePlus has consistently been a top tier performer for its price bracket. It overlaps a lot with more expensive phones, but we shouldn't expect it to just outright win against more expensive phones. We should be holding those more expensive phones to a much higher tier, to a much higher threshold. We should be demanding more out of $700, $800, $900 phones, not expecting $400 and $500 phones to punch so far above their price tag that they can somehow unseat a $1,000 phone. But yeah, so I'll be working on a OnePlus 6 audio review too. I'm really excited to check that out because OnePlus has typically outperformed flagships for headphone audio, and I'm curious to see if they can also maintain that track record over the last year with Qualcomm improving their audio capabilities. So a lot of phones, like Samsung, got a huge bump for the Galaxy, where the Galaxy for the Galaxy S7 was actually kind of a mediocre performer. It got the benefit of Qualcomm improving all of that hardware to become a better player. How about Jerry Rig Everything's clear-backed OnePlus 6? Gotta love him making the battery red again. That's from Andrew Wallace on the YouTubes. Yeah, I kind of have that love-hate watching Jerry Rig videos because like it's gadget destruction porn. There's just not much that I feel is really scientific about the way he tests devices outside of scratching the glass with picks, and I think we've kind of crested over into reasonably. Most phone manufacturers live up to the marketing that they put into their devices. So if they say it's Gorilla Glass, then I haven't run into too many situations where I doubt that. And then after that, burn and bend tests. When you're going out of your way to damage or break a device, when you flex a phone with your hands, I don't know how you can do that consistently with the same amount of pressure from the same points of pressure and not have that be, or have that be a scientifically consistent way to produce that desired effect. Is will the phone crack or break or bend? There's that little bit of subjectivity. Is he unconsciously going easier on some phones than others? I have a hard time with that channel, but it's also just fun to watch him try and break gadgets. So there's a sick thrill out of how much damage he can do to that device. So we've got a couple comments here that I just want to get to. Adita, James Vincent, Ari, Cheryl, Craig Duncanson. Craig, I actually lease my phone. Carphone Warehouse do a thing in the UK. So yeah, there are some ideas, and there are definitely some pros and cons in leasing versus buying. But just in the same way that there's the argument to be made, what's really maximizing your purchase or your bang for buck in cars? I think we're having those same conversations with phones, and I think for a lot of people out there, if they're just trying to cover the basics, I make phone calls. I check my email, I pop on and read my Facebooks, and occasionally post to Twitter or Instagram, but I'm not really trying to market myself on social media, the vast majority of people out there, I don't see where they're served by flipping their phone every year or every 2 years at the top end of the market. I think those individuals are likely well served by an Honor or a OnePlus or some other. Again, we still want some horsepower. People want to feel like their apps open quickly, that the phone's responsive, but I don't feel that they're always best served. Now, if you're watching this stream, chances are probably better than average that you're a tech enthusiast, which means you might have more demanding needs for a smartphone. You might appreciate those year-to-year changes better, where we only see those subtle refinements, but those refinements make a bigger deal to your daily use or your daily lifestyle. And then I think leasing becomes a better option. Or some of these trade-in plans, like on T-Mobile here in the United States, they've got plans to help you flip your phone every couple of months if you're really that aggressive about wanting to be on the bleeding edge. From Rishi, considering the sizable bottom bezel in the OnePlus 6, what do you think is the real use of the notch? Is this trend healthy? Yeah, I am not a fan of the notch. I'm on the G7, and I don't feel like this screen to body ratio is really benefiting my usage to any great degree, any more than the G6. You know, the G6 had a perfectly fine screen to body ratio. The V30 has a perfectly fine screen to bottom ratio. I think it's just the look of trying to maximize screen and minimize bezel, and it's a gimmick. I don't think it adds anything to the experience. Thankfully, on Android devices, the notch stays out of the way of our media. So when you throw up a video or you're watching, when you're playing a game, it's not cutting into your content. So, I mean, I guess that's a little bit better. I think that's a tragic mistake from the way that Apple launched the iPhone 10, is that their hardware literally gets in the way of what you're trying to do on the display if you try and use the full screen. Is the trend healthy? Unfortunately, I think we're stuck with it. I have never been a bezel hater. You can go back on my YouTube channel, I think 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm complaining about people complaining about bezels then. I think bezels are actually fairly necessary. You want dead space on a gadget to be able to hold it. You want impact and buffer zone. If you pick up a Lumia, like those polycarb Lumias, my 920 has this big old dent in the corner because I dropped it. Only I didn't have a case on it. And nothing on that phone shattered, cracked, or was damaged except for the polycarb crumpling a little bit. I would rather have Sony-style bezels with crumple zones so that I am less concerned about breaking my screen, and then I don't have to worry about shattering the back glass on a gadget. That, to me, would be a premium feature, and I would happily pay for that kind of build quality. I saw another... Oh, from Sherrill. Is the OnePlus 6 a mid-tier, though? And yeah, the OnePlus 6 is a mid-ranger. There is a market of phones where you can pick up a reasonable smartphone experience above the $100 price point, and then you've got phones like the Note and the iPhone 10, which come in at $1,000. Between $100 and $1,000, in the middle is somewhere around $500. I don't play this. I don't like to play this game of, well, it's a mid-ranger company, but this is the flagship from a mid-tier brand. You know, where do I have it? The View 10 is a top-of-the-line offering from Honor, but Honor's a mid-range company. So this is a flagship. And I hate playing this premium flagship mid-range dance of adjectives. I'm really only going by price. I really feel like that is the most important metric to consider from brands that aren't Samsung and Apple. I think that's what consumers are going to look at. They're going to look at bang for buck, and they're going to look at a phone which is in the middle of the market at $500 and see something which gives them 85% of what they would get from an $800 phone. So they can save $300 and get almost everything that they would have gotten from a Galaxy S9 Plus. That, to me, is the only metric that really makes this fair, that makes the conversation consistent, and that we don't have to dance around people's feelings or, you know, well, I bought into the OnePlus marketing, so it's a flagship. You're like, no, but it's not. It's really not. And it's built and designed to achieve something, but we should really only be comparing it at the tier that it was launched at. And you can say, oh, look, it's going to punch above here and it's going to do this and it's going to do that. But you're really only setting yourself up for disappointment when you compare that $529 OnePlus 6 against a Note 8. Or against an LG V30, or against an iPhone 10. Those are phones built for very specific things at the higher end of the market. You can say, well, I don't care about this feature personally. I don't think that's an important deal, or I don't care about this screen resolution, or I don't care about this audio quality. But that's you. From Goran Petrovic, Axon 7 was better than any OnePlus. I didn't like OP6, glass design. What do you think? Will phones next year overshadow 2018 phones with 7 nanometer 5G and fingerprints under the display? Yeah, 2018 really does feel like an iterative year. All of these manufacturers refining the little things that kind of annoyed us in 2017, and I'm fine with that. I really wish more manufacturers would follow Apple's lead with a TikTok strategy. I think LG is the perfect example of a company which should reduce and refine and minimize the number of devices that they have out. And if you're going to tell me that LG's design strategy is glass on glass, then don't reinvent the wheel with the LG V40. Take the V30 chassis, which is about as good as glass on glass can be, and just tweak it for the new Qualcomm 845, the new AI features, maybe give us spruce up the camera a little bit, and then make that the V40. And then you can do this TikTok. You can call it a V35 or whatever it is that you want to say. But it's for me, this notion of I've got to completely come out with a whole new phone. Galaxy S8 to Galaxy S9 is not a huge leap. So I think most companies would be better served by light touch improvements for now, because I think we're at peak smartphone. I think the current implementation of staring at glowing rectangle is probably about as good as we can make it until we get some other disruptive companion technologies, AR, voice assistants, blah, 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 until that shifts over. From Renato Laporte, people bitching about the OnePlus 6 has no IP67 certification. Apple, Huawei, Samsung, LG, and others sold non-water resistant phones for years, and I was toking. I don't know what you were toking. Oh, and I was rocking my Xperia Z. A little typo there from comment to comment. I'm not overly concerned about the lack of water resistance rating. That to me is, again, another feature that we should be expecting. I would love to see the rating, though. So this is what's frustrating is I wish companies had followed HTC's route, where HTC, what was it, the HTC 10 did not have IP67, but they did announce what their IP rating was, and I believe it was IP53. That's useful information. I would be fine knowing that my phone can survive a light drizzle. That's okay. That as long as I know that this phone was built to better survive being completely submerged underwater versus a phone that was really only certified to survive getting splashed. That to me is the consumer benefit. Of course, what's really frustrating is you're going to get a bunch of angry nerds with hard-ons for specs and numbers and certifications and ratings going, oh, it's not good enough. If OnePlus 6 had come out with IP67, a bunch of people would be like, oh, but why not IP68? Huh? Why not that? Why it's not good enough? It's worth it for the monies. Worth it. Thumbs up, thumbs down. I only like phones that are IP68. Like, it's horseshit. It really doesn't affect the daily use. And from James W's point on my YouTube live stream, drop tests are more effective for testing overall durability. I really wish. Oh, and from Fat Produce, and again, this is sort of talking about Jerry Rig Everything. I personally enjoy Jerry Rig Everything's full disassembly, reassembly videos. That those are more valuable. And Chad Lynch, Juan is into phone destruction porn. Again, sort of the sick thrill of phone destruction porn, but I'm embarrassed by it. I think we should all be embarrassed by being into phone destruction porn. But yeah, a lot of conversation coming up through this. I'm ultimately very positive on what OnePlus is doing with the OnePlus 6. I think more than anything else, It just shows a company that's grown up and has gotten a lot more sophisticated about their marketing. That's what's most interesting to me. IP68, IP67, some kind of water resistance rating. I would much rather see phones that were built to much better survive drops and shock. And I pick up an LG V30, and it's rated mil-spec 810G, drop and shock resistant. And I have zero faith in that device actually performing past the drop because it's glass on glass with a tiny metal rim and zero bezels. I don't believe it. When you drop it once and it survives that drop, it survives that impact, the phone might still be functional, but basically everything on the device is going to shatter and break. So also you've completely defeated your IP water resistance rating, your ingress protection, because one of the things that I think is most going to test your water resistance is dropping it in a situation where water is involved. And once it hits that impact, you've completely defeated the water resistance. So what was the value of building a device to that specification and then making it out of glass? And that's why I've always preferred the Galaxy Active phones over the regular Galaxy phones, is because I think they actually provide a much better benefit. The Galaxy Active phones are put your money where your geek mouth is. Do you want the best battery life? Well, Samsung puts their biggest batteries in the Actives. Not in the Notes. An Active battery will almost always be bigger than a Note battery with a phone that has a smaller screen. And then the whole back of the phone is clad in armor, in a rugged rubberized plastic shell. And again, that's going to be far more shock resistant than putting glass on the back of the phone. And then even putting glass on the back of the phone and wearing a bumper armor case like I've got my V30 in. Like, I have to leave the house with an armor case on my V30 because it's glass on glass. And I'm pretty tough on my gadgets, even though I didn't used to think I was. During the Note 4 era of phones, I thought I was just normal. But it's, it is what it is. I've gone down this rabbit hole before. And I just got a super chat from Ruri Ren. I'm so sorry I mispronounced your name. Saying good afternoon, and I will rejoin your super chat with a good morning to you. From Renata Laporte, Caterpillar. We should all buy cat phones. No, we shouldn't. We should demand $1,000 variant of a really expensive premium device that can withstand daily lifestyle abuse, especially if you have kids. From Mexican Guy, put your money where your geek mouth is. I'm gonna have to I think that's if Samsung puts out a Galaxy S9 Active, that will probably be my tagline for it. Is I'm so tired of hearing people complain. I'm so tired of hearing people complain. Oh, gadgets, they're so thin. Oh, and a battery life. And why don't they just put in bigger batteries? And I'm tired of glass on glass. And then an Active comes out, and all you hear is crickets. And I know that for part of that is because the Active was an at&t exclusive for so long, but they did an unlocked Active Galaxy S8, and no one talked about it. No one talked about it. And Kyle Ruggles, I hate the notch. My headphone jack is gone. No. Wah. From Everything Tech, have you guys heard anything about the LG V40? I've not heard anything about the V40. I'm assuming it's going to be a slightly larger G7. I really hope that LG stops this artificial division between the G and the V, and that it's the same as a Galaxy S9 and an S9 Plus. That the G is just the little phone and the V is the big phone, but other than that they're virtually identical in terms of feature set. So I want to get into some news. I want to get into some other, the V35 is coming with no notch from James W. Yeah, that's going to go to at&t, which is silly because at&t should be picking up the G7. The G7 is a really good phone. The V35 is still going to be a fine phone, but they wanted an exclusive and they were dumb. Ignoring the G because they wanted to have the only version of the V35 in the United States with carrier branding on it is dumb. Proper dumb. Especially because the V30 is essentially the same phone. Especially now with the Oreo update. But I digress. Kyle Ruggles. I remember when the G was on par with the S, but no more. I don't know, man. We're gonna talk. I'm gonna save that for the end of the video, talking about G7 stuff, and recycling is cool. I agree, Kyle. We're going to talk about the G7 pricing, but first up, I want to hit this news story because it's just something that, especially since I've been producing on Newegg and we've been doing so much gaming hardware, this is an interesting side effect. Excuse me, an interesting side effect of the current state of PC building, gaming hardware, and dealing with the energy concerns. This is a story coming out of theoutline.com, but numerous outlets have been covering this. Bitcoin is consuming as much energy as the country of Ireland. Huh. So, cryptocurrencies require a lot of specialized hardware, a lot of it, stepping on gaming hardware, GPUs, high-end computing systems, ASICs, blah, 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 blah. But, to from Rory, yay, Ireland. That's hilarious. And from Sherrill, seriously, gigawatts. So 2.55 gigawatts, the amount of energy Bitcoin is consuming at the low end every year, is nearly the same as the country of Ireland. And I think that's what's important, is we're seeing a growth of cryptocurrencies and cryptology and blockchain implementation of feature sets. And that's distributed computing that requires number crunching to happen on individual systems and server farms. So when you add all of that up, it's a startling amount of information being crunched and of energy being consumed to crunch that information. This is why, from Kyle Ruggles, Back to the Future. Yep, is the gigawatts. No, 2.55 gigawatts, obviously. They just have gigawatts put up in the title of the article on the outline because I think they're being kind of cheeky about it. But this is a concern as we're looking at how to make blockchain-style computing more sustainable. I really do believe that blockchain could serve a vital resource in moving us over into the next incarnation of the internet, where we as consumers could expect better privacy and security features, less information tracking, and we could remove some of the power from traditional ISPs and providers and services in sort of making our own distributed network free from some of their influence. Again, if we want competition, blockchain looks like, or at least blockchain ideas, blockchain philosophy, blockchain implementation looks like it could give us some of the tools necessary to free ourselves from that kind of corporate tyranny. I'll be curious to see how we can rectify that. But in the interim, I don't believe that currency is really the killer app for cryptography, blockchain, and distributed computing systems. Bitcoin as a proof of concept for this service working, for this ledger being valuable and how every transaction is produced, monitored, and completed, is vital for the future of not only computing but then also of sort of proof of ID. Blockchain is a way to verify that you did or did not say something. Could be a fascinating way to move forward. I knew this one was going to get you. Andrew Wallace, HTC, let's include the blockchains in our phones. Hashtag corporate boardroom voice. And them from Sherrill, and they're not even the first to the party. There's also Saren. Yeah, I looked up there. I think there are now 3 phone companies that are all talking about making blockchain a part of their future cell phone strategy. And I love, like you can just put blockchain in the name of your company and you can expect your stock to jump 20 points. But I don't know. When we look at some of the numbers of what a cryptocurrency is requiring, and this is the current energy draw. At what point do we balance that out? Because, energy prices are falling, but not in a lot of the places of the world where we might be doing our most aggressive crypto mining. And energy costs stuff. There is one city in the United States that has halted. I don't know if they've completely blocked it, but they put a moratorium on corporate crypto mining. Let me see if I can find it. City blocks crypto. I want to say it's in Pennsylvania, but I can't. Oh, and Cambodia apparently also blocked it too. But anyway, sorry, I can't find it off of one quick Google search. But from Edita, is blockchain the new AI? Well, again, it's a buzzword. It's trendy. People are investing in it without fully understanding what's going on. Rory, the LG V45-2, thank you, blockchain I. You know a company's going to come out with a completely ridiculous phone name for when this becomes a major part of it. But until we get better, more efficient computing for unraveling the blockchain, I think this is going to be a pretty serious concern. When one cryptocurrency, which hasn't unveiled all of its Bitcoins, I think there are only going to be 21 million Bitcoins, when everything's been sort of unlocked and ground up and found and mined. We have a lot of power that's going to go into that. Now, those power concerns are going to rise with the blockchain. And how do we reconcile that with the value of energy versus the value of a speculative potential future currency? And I don't know that anyone has a really super great answer for that just yet. While we've got a bunch of companies that are trying to also break into this space, concerns with Ethereum also, generating a lot of power draw. They recently changed up their block and their verification so that hopefully it'll minimize some of the value of running tons of ASICs or tons of server farms to unravel this stuff, but we still have a ways to go. From Harsh, just set up gigawatts of solar panels and you can go ahead with the crypto business. See, again, so like we're making money hand over fist with green technologies. Texas is without subsidies is making a ton of cash on wind power. We've got legislation pending in Southern California here that all new home developments will have to have solar. I don't know that bill will go through, but I really hope it does. It's a shame. Like, I come from New Mexico, and I think it's a travesty that not every single home in Albuquerque is not covered to the gills with solar panels. I have cloudy day today. I'm in Southern California. We're gonna have 10 cloudy days this year. But all of that costs, so I mean, like thousands and thousands of dollars of solar panels up front. But then on the back end, if we're running our crypto machines off of solar, that's a much better infrastructure for us to handle that. From Cheryl, I'm just waiting for Tesla to offer a blockchain smartphone with their Tesla battery. Oh, man. And Tesla batteries could also be really disruptive, too. Again, they're getting their manufacturing time way, way down. Kyle Netherwood, Bitcoin is only viable if you live next to a hydroelectric power plant in China. So, yeah, I actually did some mining. I let my PC run for an entire weekend. And this is how much I hate the NVIDIA GTX 970, which was a part of that class action suit. I got $30 whole back from this card being an absolute dog. But running a Bitcoin hash for it was a little bit more than 48 hours. I think I made a whopping 87 cents. Like that's not a good return. Like, my power draw on running my PC for an entire weekend, and I didn't even make a buck. Was pretty terrible. So I want to move on to something else that's also super terrible. This is a startup. This was a crowdfunding project, and it's getting some headlines because, again, we're talking about trends and buzzwordy things and getting investors excited about certain buzzwordy technologies, and then they don't actually come to pass. From Harsh, I tried to mine Bitcoin on my iPhone 10, and boy, it got hot as hell. You're a braver man than I, especially putting that stress on an Apple battery. That's madness, sir. Mad lad. That's madness. You probably took 6 months of operating life off of your iPhone battery. Kudos. But this is by way of TechCrunch. I'm an audio geek. I'm an audio nerd. I was so excited to see a startup in this space start playing with VR audio because this is a huge problem with things like user created 360 video. OSSIC, OSSIC. They did a Kickstarter and an Indiegogo for 3D sound headphones. So movement head tracking technology that would work with VR systems. And after generating $6 million, $2.7 million on Kickstarter and $3.2 million on Indiegogo, TechCrunch has all the numbers on what actually was produced and developed. I believe they only shipped a few dozen. They only built 250 pairs of headphones and only shipped a few dozen to Kickstarter backers, and now the company is gone. $6 million on crowdfunding, crowdsourcing some potentially revolutionary technology, and it just evaporated. And now I have to question, like when those monies are moved around and when they meet their goals, did they ever actually have those funds? And like Indiegogo had different rules on whether or not they met their funding and they would get cash or doing the pre-orders. I know each system has a different thing, but I would have to believe at some point that people would be getting their money back. If Indiegogo or Kickstarter is acting as some sort of escrow, for example, maybe that's the solution is, you start to get these funds when you're demonstrating some kind of manufacturing, but then the management and the security on that is just way too complicated. This happens a lot with crowdfunding projects, but I also think that we've kind of hit peak crowdfunding. Like if you're really trying to launch a technology or a product or something like that, now you're only going to see the already popular systems utilizing crowdfunding to get to what they want. I don't think that we're going to see the little mom and pop, like, hey, I've got this great idea for a product, but I don't have a huge ton of social media clout, and I haven't hired a bunch of, social media gurus or marketing people or ad agencies to push forward this message and make a big splash. It's just really frustrating. I didn't fund this project. Thankfully, I didn't put money at it, but I was really hoping to see another player in this space because that's one of the big problems I have with 360 video is I shoot 360 video and the audio doesn't track with how your head moves around or what you're looking at. And I really want that effect, especially having played with some more VR. I would like to be able to create that effect of spatially aware audio in my 360 video recordings. From Sharil, the problems of crowdfunding. Doo-doo happens. From Demir Frank, check the Audi's Mobius 3D headphones. They're actually a thing already. And from Sharil, I think we reached peak crowdfunding with the original Pebble. See, I think the original Pebble showed us the potential, the power of crowdfunding. And that was such an exciting step. I mean, look at what we were able to produce from that and look at what this company did. The second I saw future Pebbles trying to launch via crowdfunding, I got my Pebble Time off of a Kickstarter project. The Pebble Time 2 with the heart rate tracker never materialized because the company went under. Thankfully, I did get my money back from that. It's just really frustrating that now the same kind of like social media gamification has basically happened with a service that I think started with the best of intentions to try and help people find ways to create new things. Now it just seems to be, and again, I heard this from a friend who was trying to crowdfund a film. They had already raised, I think, $150,000 for producing this film. And they set their goal, I think, at something like $100,000 on a crowdfunding site to then fund it themselves through this service so they could get the headline, oh my gosh, we funded this so quickly. Thank you so much. All of the backers, all of the people that are supporting our project got all of this buzz out of it. And then I think they ended up raising another, I think, $200,000 for this film on other people. So they effectively tripled their budget, even though they already had the money that they really needed to get the film produced in the first place. So it was all just a game. You know, it was all just not a ploy, but they've gamed crowdfunding to try and make those kinds of things happen. When I look at a Pebble, Kickstartering the next generation of the Pebble, I have to believe that company has to have millions of dollars that they can put towards R&D and production and getting something produced. Now, this is just a fancy pre-order system. It's not even that. They're trying to get those social media feel-good headlines. The fastest funding of a project ever on Kickstarter. The highest funding for a smartwatch. And that's lame. From Demir, Adita Anil, Sennheiser made one for 3D audio recording. Sennheiser made MBO. I still want to try one. I'm curious to see, because I don't believe Ambio. I have to look into it more. I tried to reach out to Sennheiser to see if the Ambio headset would work. Like if I could record audio off of an Ambio headset and apply that to a 360 video, but it didn't seem like it was going to play nice. Instead, it was if you have a regular video that, you can't look around the video, just like you would see a regular video pop up in a video streaming site. The Ambio will record 3D audio around you, so it's more depth and spatial, and it's got more sound spectrum room and range, but it's not tracking your head movement, or it's not tracking differences in how audio is recorded. They have a multiple thousands of dollars microphone that is built specifically for 3D spatial awareness, and it's amazing. But that's not a consumer solution. That's not even a me solution. I need something a little bit more cost effective than that. But moving right along, we've got a couple security stories that I want to blitz through here real quick. This is from 9to5Mac. Let me get this queued up here. Plain text Apple ID passwords included in a teen phone monitoring app. And this is a huge data breach. So this is coming from a report from ZDNet. A popular app used by parents to monitor their teens has suffered a data breach. The app TeenSafe touts that it's a secure monitoring app for iOS that allows parents to monitor text messages, location, calling history, web history, and more. Included in the data breach was a list of plain text Apple ID passwords. According to the report, TeenSafe left its servers, which are hosted on Amazon's web services, unprotected. Thus, anyone could access the information without a password. So, this is terrible. This is bad. I did a report with NBCLA a couple years ago talking about different consumer safety issues. And one of them, we did spend some time talking about parents monitoring their kids' usage. I have never been a fan of these spy services. You install software on a phone and it reports everything that happens on the phone. Because of the way that you then have to give that information up to a third-party company and then just trust that they're going to have your best interests at heart in protecting your child's information. Everything your child does on their device is now in someone else's hands. It's already creepy enough when it's Google or Apple or Amazon or Microsoft. That's way creepier if you let a man in the middle intercept that information to report on what your kids are doing. And this is exactly one of the major fears, one of the major compromises. Those companies will not act as readily or with as much security as you as a parent taking that data into your own hands. From Rory, don't we do that anyway with Google? We do, which is exactly another one of the stories I'm going to be talking about here in just a bit, is Google also tracking people and Google's selfish ledger and all that stuff. But how many more holes are you going to put into Google's protection of your data? So Google already has everything that they want on you, and they're accruing an incredible amount of information every single time you use a Google service, every time you use a Google product, a Google smartphone. That's a huge bucket of data that they're collecting on you. So as a parent, do you want to go and punch another hole in that bucket to allow someone else access to all of that information? That's dumb. That's proper dumb. And I believe it only sets up a distrust for your child. I am terrified of what my daughter is going to do with technology when she's old enough to really start getting her own gadgets and her own social media accounts, her own email, her own abilities to communicate with her peers. I'm terrified. But I can tell you right now, what I'm not going to do is take all of her content, all of her information, and make it easier for someone else to potentially crack into all of her gadgets, products, data, services, etc. I'm not going to continue to compromise her security by trying to spy on her. That is not something I'm going to make a play for. So, again, don't use these types of products. We need to have parents that are more tech savvy, more tech literate, and joining the conversation with their kids, as opposed to either knowingly putting this on there and you're telling your child, I don't trust you to have this phone, so I'm going to monitor everything you do on it, or putting it on there in secret, in which case when they find out that they're trying to circumvent certain types of protections, that you're spying on them is even more distrustful. This is not a good way to go about raising a child. This is dumb. This is terrible. Don't use these things. We've just been shown perfect evidence of why this is a ridiculously bad way to go about monitoring or trying to protect your children. Again, it's this like, the Reverend Lovejoy's wife, Mrs. Lovejoy from The Simpsons. Won't someone please think of the children? And like they want something spoon-fed to them so that they don't have to actually engage with what their kids are doing, right? Like that's terrible. No, if you're concerned about what your kids are doing on Instagram, then you need to be Instagram savvy. I'm sorry, that's the way of the future. That's where we're going. That's where we're headed. Or you could just be a crappy parent and say, oh, I don't care, and then your kids will just have to figure out their own their own issues, and you just won't be a part of their lives in any meaningful way when it comes to their digital privacy and cybersecurity. So shame on you. From Gansey Tech Nerd. Hey, Juan. Hey, all. Long time. Welcome to the show, Gansey. I appreciate you joining us on another Monday morning tech chat. From Kyle Ruggles, just a matter of time till Google has a slip up. And again, it's not going to be, I think, this issue where Google is just going to open up a server where all of our information was just stored in a text document without any security on it. But it's the same thing with like the iCloud hacks. It's not about going up against Google's firewalls and protections and encryption. It's about, messing with a few engineers or messing with the individual end users so that you can, hacking is more about social science than it is about, hacking the mainframe with all of your cool Matrix style computer gear. When you're trying to protect that stuff, putting more gaps in your security means that there are more wedge points and there are more opportunities for bad actors to get into your stuff. It's already bad enough that all of our stuff is on major services like Facebook and Google. Why make it even easier for someone to get into all your stuff? Moving right along. From Kyle Ruggles, or a disgruntled engineer. People aren't perfect. It's not that difficult. So, mentioning Facebook, my own little personal segue there. The human is always the weak link in a good, secure environment from Sherrill. Yeah, it's the primates, man. This meatbags. The computers are actually pretty good. Getting around the users is not difficult at all. And this is one of the things that makes some of our conversation even more frustrating, is watching some fairly insidious stuff going down and then watching these companies try and cover up or backtrack it as just being a mistake or a bug. This is coming by way of the Register. The Facebook Android app caught seeking super user clearance. So this is, again, I'm going to have a link on this when the show wraps up. Social networking site and market leading data broker, Facebook is once again taking heat for playing fast and loose with access to personal information. This time, the Facebook Android app is under the spotlight after users noticed it requesting an extraordinary amount of access privileges. The users note that the change has happened in recent days, leading to speculation that a new feature or update is to blame, and it may not have been intentional. The end of this article, they did get word from Facebook. The official reply from Facebook is, quote, a coding error in one of our anti-fraud systems caused a small number of people running the Facebook app and certain permission management apps on rooted Android devices to see a request for additional access permissions. We do not need or want these permissions, and we have already fixed this issue. We apologize for any confusion. Love, Facebook. I added that last part. They did not say love, Facebook. So, I don't believe that this was just like a straight up accident. I don't know that you can go into your fraud prevention system in an app and flick a couple switches and accidentally have your app dig into every single tiny detail on devices that are rooted. This feels too specific. Like Facebook saying, hey, if their phone is rooted, then we should be able to get everything off of it. And that's... How do you just accidentally inject code into an app update that serves that purpose? I don't buy it. I just don't believe it. And already, Facebook has gotten kind of obnoxious about how intrusive they are to people who aren't even really utilizing or using their service. Again, if you're using the Firefox web browser, I would highly recommend checking out the Facebook container. I've had pretty good experiences using it. It just basically lumps all of your Facebook activity into one Facebook bucket, and it prevents cookies that report your usage back to Facebook from seeing who you are. So it's a great little browser plugin. I'm sure there's probably something analogous to that on Chrome, but I've been using Firefox Quantum, and I really dig it. From Andrew Wallace, everyone should use the app Friendly instead of the official Facebook app. I've been using Friendly. I like Friendly a lot, and it's still one of the only... I think it's one of the only ways left that you can also get your Facebook Messenger notifications. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong, but without using an official Facebook app. So even Facebook Lite or Facebook Messenger, I try and disable all of that from my Android devices. And I also see battery life improvements. The entire Facebook suite of apps sucks down a lot of power. And moving over to Friendly for my limited Facebook usage, because I'm really not using Facebook much anymore, it seems to have had a positive impact on my phone's battery life. From Ruari, Facebook moved millions of people's data from Ireland to the USA to circumvent the EU's new privacy laws. I think that's a very telling statement as to how Facebook is considering user data security. From Ganzi Tech Nerd, fraud prevention system to commit fraud. Facebook is really the alter ego of the FBI. Woo! From Kyle Netherwood, just installed Facebook container. Good man. Protect your data from the Facebooks. This is, again, I want to keep pressing this for our data, for our services. This is going to be that fight that we nerds have to wage with all of our normie family and friends. And I hate to say it that way, but I've been taking more and more little pieces away from how I use Facebook to share information with my family and friends. The biggest change for Marie and I was having a kid. I did not want Lex to be plastered all over Facebook. I didn't want that for her. I didn't want every moment of her growing upness, embarrassing moments, funny moments, silly moments to be broadcast publicly. I didn't think that was fair to her. I completely appreciate and I completely understand parents that are taking a different approach. But for Marie and I, who both of us have had some, not bad, but some anxious, anxiety-inducing issues with social media, a problem with a stalker from one of our previous web shows, we've just seen firsthand some of the complications and some of the issues with living all of your life publicly. And we've been trying to set up some barriers. We did not grow up at a time where our parents could broadcast every single thing that we did as if we were the stars of a reality show that 10 people were watching. And that information would be linked to us forever. There would be no escaping it. You could be, in your 50s or 60s and be a renowned lawyer and a judge, and someone with a little social media savvy could get into your parents' account and see, pictures of you as a little baby playing in a tub. We wanted to prevent that for Lex. So one of the main things is we stopped sharing photos almost entirely on Facebook. Outside of when I post something to Instagram because it's a part of Facebook, I just fart it over to Facebook. But those are like flower macros and selfies. I think to date there are still only 6 photos of Lex over 2.5 years. Only 6 photos of Lex that are publicly available, and I think only 4 of them show her face. So, that's a trend that I'm definitely going to continue. And it's also, I feel it's brought our family a little closer together. There is a cloud web bucket of photos for my daughter that people can go and see when they want, or family and friends can go and see when they want. I'm not filling up someone else's Facebook timeline with photos of my daughter. I'm not creating noise in the Facebook channel for my family and friends. There are probably friends of mine, or at least Facebook friends of mine, who are terrible people who don't want to see photos of my daughter. Those people suck. But at least I'm not filling up their Facebook feed with that kind of crap, And for some of the issues that my wife and I had when we were trying to have a kid, that social media conversation also just became a little bit sensitive. And when we were having some problems, it was like everything in our feed were all of the other friends of ours who were having kids. And it just made us feel like such failures, or just really kind of twisting the knife in with the problems that we were having. After we had Lex, I knew I had 2 people in my Facebook circle that were going through some really difficult challenges of their own. And it just kind of felt like the responsible thing to do, to not be dumping photo after photo after photo after photo of our newly delivered baby in their faces. So again, just as being the responsible citizen that we did, we collected all that and we made it private, and that's how we share it. So it was one thing we took away from Facebook, and I think we're all better for it. And so I think that's another strategy. That's another opportunity. Let's go back to photo albums, even if those are online photo albums of it's a book, it's just not a public thing. You can say, hey, this is just for you, for your parents. You can say hey, this is special. No one else can see this. This is for you. I created this for us. And that's something that I think is more meaningful in the long run. Hold on, let me scroll back up. There were a couple comments here. I'm not going to reply to one guy being kind of a jerk. From Maris M, there was also an app called Light Facebook, not by Facebook, where you can still use the Messenger. Definitely would recommend checking that out. And again, anything that's going to minimize your battery draw too. That's kind of a big deal too. I missed what that conversation was about. From Sherrill, thanks for that one. Good for Lex to have a dad like you. From Kyle Ruggles, good dad. I mean, again, I want her to be free to make dumb mistakes and then not have to live with that for her entire life, because I needed imaginary internet points and validation of likes and hearts and stuff. From Ruari, Google Photos scans your photos. I know a woman who had pictures of her kids in the bath. Google emailed her asking were they photos of her children. Don't fancy Google scanning my photos. I've also backed up a lot of just my auto backup to services like OneDrive and Google Photos. I get it. I know it's a convenience thing, but I'm just saving my photos locally now. I have a giant NAS, just got 6 hard drives underneath my desk right now. When I'm on Wi-Fi, those photos back up there, I can access them anywhere I have an internet connection. I'm fine. I like making my own cloud. And then got some other issues going on in the chat. So the reason why I kind of wanted to get into this usage or this media topic, this conversation, and I know I kind of get into a lot of that, is some of the stuff that's been coming out about Google and that kind of stuff too. So hold on one second. There we go. So this is the next story. This is okay. So this is kind of coming back to what who was it? From Ruari. So Google Photos scanning your images. Well, Google is currently under scrutiny. This isn't. I don't know that this is an official like law enforcement investigation, but Google is being probed for secretly tracking Android users. Now, I'm taking the story with a little grain of salt because the main complaint, the main entity lobbying this complaint against the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC, is Oracle. So, again, huge grain of salt because Oracle is not very happy with Google over how their patent disputes have been going down. But Oracle is claiming that Google is tracking user location even when location services are turned off, and there is no SIM card inserted in their devices. So, I don't know about you guys, but have you ever read the end user licensing agreement when you sign on for Android and what kind of information they accrue and collect? I've kind of always just assumed that even when I turn off the little GPS icon, if I connect that device to Wi-Fi, for example, Google already has a really good idea of, I said Google and 4 phones lit up on my desk. I always assume that Google has a really good idea of where I am based on the SSID that I connect to. So let's say I have the SIM card out of a phone and I connect to the Wi-Fi at LAX. I pretty much just assume that Google knows that I'm at LAX. I just kind of took that for granted. From Kyle Ruggles, terms and conditions may apply was a great flick on Netflix. Yes, I would highly recommend checking that out. And I talked about it, I think a couple months ago, about, was it in the Netherlands? Was it in Denmark? I can't remember. But one of the Northern European companies actually did a sit-down reading of all of the terms of services that you agree to. And they filmed the whole thing, but they did a master cut. And it took something like 72 hours to read through, the terms of service you agree to with an iPhone, Twitter, and Facebook. So you install 2 apps on an iPhone, and if you were to really read everything in what you're agreeing to in the licensing agreement, it would take you like 3 days to do it. So we need some kind of personal data regulatory oversight. I think we've gotten to a point where here in the United States, the FTC is ill-equipped to handle a technology landscape that's changing and evolving this fast, and we need some kind of way to examine, not only what information is being collected, but how it's being used. And I would also love to see, profit sharing. If my information is valuable and you're using it for marketing and for, even if it's, like in a giant group, a bucket of data, and you're saying these are consumer trends, it's the same thing that I would like to see on like most photo sharing sites. I have photos up on stock photo services. So I can share the photo and people can see it. And then if someone wants to buy it, I get like 27 cents or something like that. I would love to do the same. If I have an agreement with Facebook, and then I would be able to see how much of my data is being utilized, how it's being monetized, and, I get 5 cents or Facebook credit or something that goes towards products or services that I might want to use. There's a part of this that I think could be way more fair. If you're going to make me the product, I kind of feel like we're getting to a point where just having access to a service like Facebook or a service like Google isn't necessarily enough anymore to balance the costs of how intrusive some of this data collection is becoming. So I think that could be a fair compromise. If you're going to monetize my information and you're going to monetize my usage and my behavior, maybe it's more that I don't spend $1,000 on one of your phones to then have the privilege of you monetizing my behavior. It's we all profit share in this. And I get a tiny fraction of it, but I still get something. And then I also know how often my data is being utilized for those types of issues. I would be more aware of how that's all going down. And it just shows up in my AdSense account. Here's another 17 cents. Someone really wanted to know what your favorite burrito was. Like, fine. But let's do that. This is from West Hill. They figure the services they offer is their payment for your data, and then also free phones, maybe something like that. And West Hill, I totally appreciate that. But again, I think right now corporate infrastructure and corporate power is lopsided, and I think we just need to rein in some of that stuff. But I don't want to do it in just like a broadsword, blunt force instrument kind of way. I'd like to see if we can't do something smart with this. It's not just coming to the table and saying, hey, stop using my data. It's more, you have a collection of services, and your collection of services is monetized in a specific way, and it's monetized off of stuff that I contribute to it. You would not have a service were it not for the collected information that you garner from your users. So let's all work together on what the best way forward is, so that everyone comes out ahead. People are better notified. There's better conveyance as to what's going on, and potentially even more money is being made, because there might be people who would offer up even more or contribute even more to that process, knowing that they would be included in the spoils of that information and that gathering too. So, I think right now it's entirely short-sighted to just create new services that are cool, get a bunch of people using them for free, then slap ads on it, and then take all of their information and just dump it into whoever's going to offer up a ton of money. A Cambridge Analytica, I forget what their new company name is. Cambridge Analytica closed their doors. Now they're Emerdata. So now be on the lookout for Emerdata doing a whole bunch of shady shit on Facebook to get all of your data. From Craig Duncanson, I'm going to have to look into this Facebook container. Do it! It's going to sign you out of Facebook. Then you re-log back into Facebook. And in Firefox, you'll see a little blue bar on Facebook's site. So on Facebook and on Instagram, you see this little blue bar. And all it does is just block off your Facebook usage from the rest of your internet usage. Great. I love it. Doesn't slow down my browser at all. I'm a huge fan. So one of the things that I also wanted to point to, and this was a big story that we talked about on the Board at Work podcast, and it's this is now coming back to Google. This is called the Selfish Ledger. So The Verge broke this story, and it's this in-house. Sorry, I'm playing some of the video for those of you watching. For those of you listening, I'm going to ramble through describing what this is. But this is sort of an in-house project pitching a notion of collecting an insane amount of user data, but then using that collection to help drive behavior. So taking, like if you go to Google and you request what they have on you, you'll see a huge amount of stuff that Google's collected on your behavior. And so what the Selfish Ledger is that this is a thought experiment from 2016. What they would be trying to do is then you tell Google, I have these goals. I want this work goal. I have this lifestyle goal. I have this health goal. And Google's incredible collection of information on you would then try to guide your behavior to achieving those goals. So The Verge reached out for a comment, and this is formerly of Google X. This is sort of their skunk works or their secret lab. And the reply that they got from a Google X spokesperson was the following quote: "We understand if this is disturbing, it is designed to be. This is a thought experiment by the design team from years ago that uses a technique known as speculative design to explore uncomfortable ideas and concepts in order to provoke discussion and debate. It's not currently related to any current or future products." And again, I don't know that I buy that. This entire podcast is like tinfoil hat time. when we're looking at something like Selfish Ledger, I kind of feel like all of the trends point to this being how we move forward. I think every company is trying to figure out not only how can we just monetize user data, but how can we then dictate and guide user behavior. Um, in the earliest incarnation of this, it's like the Facebook algorithm. Getting rid of chronological view was a move towards trying to maximize how much time someone would spend on Facebook. And they're doing that by feeding up information that they think will keep the user using Facebook longer. So it's not just what's the newest piece of information coming in, it's what will keep you going through your stream for as long as possible. That backfired a bit with Instagram. But that is a way to alter user behavior. Google products and services are doing the same thing. You watch a couple videos on YouTube, and YouTube will clumsily try and suggest other videos to keep you going down that rabbit hole of watching a video. That's behavior modification. So it doesn't take much imagination to extrapolate that into other areas. Look at Google Fitness services. Look at Google Health services. Look at every time I say Google, it's turning on all of my phones. This is hilarious because I'm not even saying hot word. I'm just saying Google, and they're turning on. Again, it's almost like YouTube knows that I'm talking about them in maybe not the most flattering way. So the Selfish Ledger, it's a 9-minute in-house video for Google, and nothing about it really seems that impossible or that outside the realm of personality, or that they are already starting to incorporate some of these ideas into current products and services. This seems like the natural direction that we're heading with all of this, is feed a whole bunch of your information into machine learning algorithms, artificial intelligence, whatever buzzword we're using, and have that spit out meaningful results. And to a point, that's something that I think a lot of us really want. I want to get rid of the current app infrastructure that we have. I think we have a huge problem with conveyance and discovery. So if I want to find, like we were in San Diego last weekend. If I want to find a restaurant, Google has so much information on my behavior. I should be able to say, hot word, hey, artificial intelligent voice assistant, I'm looking for a restaurant that's within walking distance of my hotel, and I'm feeling Italian. And then have it spit out some results which might be meaningful to me. It can't do that unless it's got a huge bucket of data on my behavior and on my and on my current trends. So I also wouldn't necessarily mind that also tying into like my fitness data. So I could say, hey, company voice assistant, I'm looking for a restaurant within walking distance of my hotel, and that is going to say, then maybe say, okay, well, this is half a mile away and it gets good reviews, but there's another restaurant a mile and a half away that you might want to consider, and then that will also help you reach your fitness goals. You're like, okay, that's great. Let me do that. I don't mind a bit more of a hike. And, if I'm going to get Italian food, it's going to be really starchy and carb heavy, and I could walk it off a bit before I get back to my hotel. Stuff like that, all tying together. I kind of want that. I kind of want that Star Trek computer experience, but we can't get there. But, if the Star Trek computer experience is in an altruistic, semi, not communist, but socialist future scenario, like the best utopian society that we could create. So the Star Trek computer can do that, but the Star Trek computer isn't Facebook, and the Star Trek computer isn't Google. So we have some bigger problems there. But yeah, I thought this was an interesting thought experiment that already seems to be executed now. It's already happening. So I people who are flipping out of the Selfish Ledger, it's so scary, and even the Verge article is very, like, they're trying to paint this as being like something outside the norm, when this is exactly the life that we're living right now, 2 years later from this being produced in 2016 to living life with a smartphone in 2018. This is exactly where every trend is headed. Let's mine all of this information, and then let's try and utilize that to guide user behavior. I don't see where this is any different or anything scary. Well, it's concerning because of the companies involved, but I don't see where a video from 2 years ago is really outside the norm of where we're heading. Um, from Gansy Tech Nerd, but if Google knows your favorite cuisine, then telling Google Assistant that you're hungry should automatically give you restaurants and you serving that cuisine. I completely agree. I'm sorry, I'm going to butcher this name, Deboyodi. We are the puppets of Google. And this is what hilarious. Again, we're talking about this. Can Google change our behavior? Absolutely, they can. And then Google Assistant is going to start making phone calls for us. And eventually, Google Assistant is going to start calling other Google Assistants so that we don't even need to be involved with it. And then we'll pick up our phone. The phone's just going to tell us what to do. And we'll all be proper marionettes of the Google infrastructure. From Rory, maybe we are all becoming the old people who think the future is weird and scary. And from Kyle Ruggles, Her, the movie Her. Yeah, again, the what we see in the movie Her is kind of what I would like to get to. I think that's a good future. That to me is the best possible utopian future we could get out of the current way that companies profit off of our data. I don't know. I don't think that we're becoming the weird future people who think the future is weird and scary. It's just if we don't have these conversations now about guiding the direction that all this stuff heads, then there's the potential for this to get dark really fast. And I don't want us to get there. I want us to have good times with all this stuff. From Chad Lynch, sad that Cortana isn't this advanced. Man, Cortana is such a bummer. I've already talked way too long about Cortana, but when she came out on Windows phones, she was amazeballs. The first time I picked up a Lumia and I hit the Cortana button and I spoke into it, remind me to ask my wife about the dog's medication. And the next time my wife texted me, I got a little pop-up alert saying, oh, don't forget to ask about the dog's medication. Was incredible. The first time I picked up Cortana and said, remind me to buy bread. And I forget what it was. It was something like, the next time I'm at the supermarket, remind me to buy bread. And Cortana asked which supermarket, and I said any. And then the next time I was by a Ralph's, it picked up on my location and said, oh, you're by a Ralph's. Would you, don't forget to buy bread. And I'm like, this is so creepy and yet so incredibly useful. Just some sad stuff. Okay, so I want to wrap up the politics and tech talk with sort of the current state of net neutrality, and then we'll get to the LG G7 conversation. So if you have any questions about the G7 or anything that we're doing for coverage on the G7, anything that you might be able to see on the G7, I'm hoping that the cloud's clear, and after this podcast, I can go out and shoot some more camera samples on the G7. I kind of have those questions at the ready. But first, this was a story almost a week ago. I probably should have covered it last week's podcast. Let me get this right here. And this is from Medium, but again, a number of outlets are covering this. Documents show Ajit Pai met with at&t executives right after the company started paying Michael Cohen. Now, Congress needs to overturn the FCC's net neutrality repeal and investigate. And this is going hand in hand now that the Senate has passed this action to try and prevent the repeal of Title II regulation. The House Democrats are now starting to step up their fight. This is going to be a significantly harder challenge because we only needed 3 votes. We ended up we got 3 votes from the GOP in the Senate, but we're somewhere closer to, what is it? I think it's 160 representatives have committed so far, but I can't remember exactly what the ranks are. But essentially, it's going to be a much harder fight for the House. So this is a very concerning aspect of the current regulatory capture that we see at the FCC. So Ajit Pai has denied hearing from Michael Cohen, but Freedom of Information Act documents show he met with at&t executives a month after Cohen began receiving payments from the company. So this is delicate because I believe Medium is drawing a conclusion that can't necessarily be supported when it comes to an investigation from law enforcement. Michael Cohen meets with at&t executives, a lot of money is exchanged, and a month later, Ajit Pai is taking meetings with at&t representatives. A lot can happen in the middle of that month, And we also know that Edgy Pie has his own connections to the telecommunications industry. He used to be a former lead counsel for Verizon. He's already friendly with these companies. I don't necessarily believe that Michael Cohen, because Michael Cohen doesn't seem particularly effective at his lobbying job, is necessarily the leverage that got AT&T meeting with Edgy Pie. I personally believe that at the same time, Edgy Pie would probably have taken these meetings with AT&T all on his own. I don't think that I don't think that he needed any extra influence from an outsider like Michael Cohen to convince him to listen to the influence of a company like AT&T. But this is also what's frustrating is we have a regulatory body. The FCC is designed to protect consumers, which is currently headed up by people that are extremely friendly to the top winning mega tier corporations in this space. And that's an untenable situation. And that's, again, why we need to protect Title II regulation until we can find ways of improving competition and improving resource and access to those, especially those of us who, in our various communities, who are currently lacking competitive broadband infrastructure. Until we get to that point, we need to protect the services on this platform, this internet. And it's pretty frustrating to see how easily gamed our current regulatory agencies are. And, so now we move forward. So the current state of net neutrality, the Senate voted to halt the repeal. The repeal is still, I think, on track for June 11th. So at June 11th, even if this process isn't finished, because this is a ton of congressional bureaucracy, we're playing these legislative games. Again, they're tools, necessary tools in the legislative process, but they are these bureaucratic games to get around the majority leaders in both the House and the Senate. And so you have to have a certain number of senators or congressmen and women that will sign on to carrying forth this vote. That takes a long time to get through that process. And on June 11th, I think, regardless of where we are in that process, that those rules will be repealed. So on June 11th, net neutrality goes away, I think, regardless. I don't think anything about this process is going to halt that. But it puts elected officials on notice. And this is one of those points. Anyone who is considering voting for one side or the other, net neutrality is something that overwhelmingly, conservative or liberal, seems to be supported. It's a tiny minority of people that seem to disagree with the tenets of net neutrality, and we can argue about where those lines should be drawn. But if you leave it up to the states, they're probably going to enact much stricter policy. The bill going up to protect net neutrality in California and New York is a lot harsher than the OIO, the Open Internet Order, as enforced by the FCC. So again, if you're a conservative and you don't like the OIO, you're going to hate the state versions of this even more. So this is better policy to have a regulatory agency that is not completely in the pocket of big internet. Kyle Ruggles. So I'm wondering, who voted to repeal net neutrality? They're voting to keep it, but again, this is unfortunately, woefully, mostly on party lines. We got 3 GOP senators to jump side and support the 49 Democrats and independents in the Senate. I don't think the House is gonna budge on this. There's such a bigger disparity between liberals and conservatives in the House, and the House has been so antagonistic that I doubt we'll see the same kind of shift happen. But this is what's necessary, is putting those politicians on notice in what's looking to be one of the more brutal midterm elections coming up. A lot of young people looking to vote on a number of different topics. I don't know that there's going to be this blue wave, but for the first time in a while, we're going to see politicians actually having to campaign and fight a little bit harder for their seats. And this is going to be another talking point that they can levy against conservative politicians, or GOP politicians. I don't believe that repealing Title II is necessarily smart conservative politics. I think it's actually pretty foolhardy. And again, if you're a conservative and you're only looking at immediate short-term gain for the top players in an industry, and you're not looking at competition, and you're not looking at growth, you're not looking at infrastructure, then I think that's short-sighted. I don't think you're being a good conservative. So this is where we have to wedge the issue. It's holding those politicians accountable in the same way that we have, you know, a sheriff's deputy in, or is it a sheriff in Texas, talking about voting out politicians that don't support sensible gun control in Texas, where you would think they'd be a little bit more Yosemite Sam about things like guns. This is also what we need to do as digital citizens. You know, if you have politicians that aren't supporting plans for competition, infrastructure, rollout of future broadband services, not just 5G. We need backhaul. We need fiber to home. We need so much more to make every community in the United States competitive. If you lack that foresight, if you lack that support, then maybe you need to be voted out of office. And that's where we go. From Ganzi Tech Nerd, a net neutrality discussion happened at a news channel here in India, and an internet service provider shamelessly said that there is nothing wrong in getting paid by big websites to promote them. Yeah. So when it's not even shameful, when corporations can shamelessly go out there and sort of run roughshod over the sentiment of the people, then yeah, we need to start looking at other situations. And maybe that also means public options. Or Michigan might go to a broadband, a publicly available free broadband infrastructure for citizens in Michigan. And I'm all for it. If they can't get good competition from major carriers and suppliers, then those carriers need to be made irrelevant so that you can make room for businesses who do want to compete. And that's just the way of it. If you're going to say capitalism, then this is the offshoot of that. This is how we protect and engage meaningfully in a capitalist environment. Kyle Netherwood, I'm not American, but it seems pretty clear that they need to outlaw corruption and lobbying before anything else can be done. And I completely agree. I think one of the major root causes is campaign financing reform and how influence is spread through lobbying efforts in DC, because it does not resemble the conversations being had everywhere else in the country. There's some other conversations too, net neutrality, religion and politics, separating those and other areas of the world. And I am ill-equipped to handle those conversations right now. But thank you for these topics. Oh man, Ruri talking about the referendum in Ireland about abortion. Yeah. Again, some really heady stuff coming to the table in a variety of environments. For my part in leading a tech podcast, if you are outside of the United States, I would highly recommend joining some kind of local effort, campaign, letter writing, phone calling to your elected officials to make your thoughts known on net neutrality before the United States screws this up for everybody else. From Maris M., what are the main arguments against net neutrality? It's hard for me to sum up in a brief period of time. Essentially, the arguments typically hinge on things like corporate autonomy, not having the government tell businesses what they can and can't do. And I know Ajit has tried to frame this as some sort of freedom or liberty issue. Again, I mentioned this in last week's show. Since the Reagan administration, we've been so concerned about the government boogeyman impeding our liberty, impeding our freedom, that we've essentially allowed corporations to impede our liberty and impede our freedom and charge us more for the privilege. The problems I have with the competition argument is a lot of corporations, a lot of your major ISPs, a lot of your carriers right now currently seem to withhold infrastructure improvements under the threat of net neutrality. The two don't really have anything to do with each other. Before net neutrality was signed into law, did we see a trend towards more competition or less competition? We saw a trend towards at&t and Verizon buying up as many smaller ISPs and carriers as they could. Same thing, Charter, Cox, Comcast, Spectrum, Time Warner, All of these corporations worked really hard at minimizing competition, influencing state law to prevent competition, and then swallowing up smaller competitors and smaller players so they could themselves be larger. This is all before net neutrality. Net neutrality is the debate between what the internet should be classified as, if it's an information service or a telecommunication service. And so I saw this like really silly, pithy reply. Someone posted it. So Elizabeth Warren tweeted, Democrats want to stop internet providers from blocking access, filtering content, or charging higher fees. I'm speaking on the Senate floor ahead of the big vote to save net neutrality. I don't necessarily have a lot of stock in Elizabeth Warren's voice as it pertains to technology, but I think she's been a great advocate for consumer rights, especially for financial institutions. So I think, she's got a valid voice in this debate for protecting consumer regulations. And so someone else posts this really silly, "Oh, are you? I can't wait to see you speak out against what Facebook, Twitter, and Google have been doing to conservatives for years now." And so the main arguments against net neutrality have been conflating information services with technologies, telecommunication services. I believe that the internet has become a necessary part of our economy and the future, and it will be the backbone future for healthcare, for education, and for a variety of other services and a variety of other institutions. So I believe that backbone infrastructure, the internet, should be regulated much like you would regulate phone lines. Back, the phones were regulated Title II as a telecommunications instrument, or you should regulate it like we regulate water and power. I don't believe an electricity company should be able to tell you, you can use this type of blender, but you can't use this type of curling iron. That's a clumsy metaphor, but that's generally how I feel in terms of what can or cannot be done on the internet. I don't believe Comcast should be able to prioritize some services over others, and I don't believe Comcast should be able to throttle some services over others, and I don't believe Comcast should be allowed to extort more money from some services over others, especially as Comcast and internet service providers in general get paid twice. They get paid by the user and they get paid by the supplier of a service. I think that's where their beginning and end of the discussion ends. They should have no influence on that. So then when conservatives get out there and they get their undies all twisted up about Facebook censoring conservative content or YouTube kicking channels off of conservative content, kicking conservative channels off of their platform, that to me is different. That's an information service. Google lives on the internet, but they are not the internet. So Google, say YouTube, should be allowed to do whatever they want on their platform, right? You have not been halted from going to a competing service. You can go to YouTube is not an institution. The internet is an institution. It's the bedrock. So a conservative should be able to go and make their own conservatube, conservative video sharing platform. Conservatives went and started posting gun videos on Pornhub. You were not stopped from sharing or disseminating your information. And that is the major difference here. The internet is not an information service. It's not some fun thing you do like Twitter. It's the entire infrastructure, which was largely created using public funds, has been supported by numerous preferential tax breaks, fees that are associated with your bills, so that your money is also being paid into supposedly improving this infrastructure where we haven't seen that money really going towards making our broadband services better and reaching broadband services to people in more rural areas. So, short story, incredibly long, I don't see a good faith argument against net neutrality, except it prevents Comcast from milking their customers for even more money. That's the big argument. It's good for Comcast, so we should get rid of net neutrality. You should pay more. You should have less access. Your content should be filtered. You'll have to abide by new terms of service that will probably get increasingly restrictive over what you can do or what you can say or what you can consume. And that's the big argument. So I don't buy it. I see from Gordon Freeman, liberals don't work. They are all on welfare. No, that's not true. More money is paid from California into the federal coffers than the reverse. So if you look at all these red states, especially the ones that have engaged in the most conservative tax schemes for supporting big businesses, we're subsidizing all of those red states. So nice try. California is facing some huge deficit problems and some huge economic problems while being the world's 5th largest economy. And we'd be able to better fix up our own house if we didn't have to pay out a whole bunch of money to keep red states solvent. So that's not even relevant. Gansy Tech Nerd. The first step to net neutrality is unlimited bandwidth for everyone. FUP and throttling should be made illegal. And so I don't necessarily have a problem with like paying for a business tier of internet access. You know, like if I could get pricing like Chattanooga, I could pay $80 a month for gigabit broadband. That to me sounds perfectly reasonable. Right now, I'm spending substantially more than that for 300 megabytes down and 20 megabytes up, and I don't always get that. So, you know, putting caps, you know, a data cap doesn't change anything. None of these caps relate in any way, shape, or form to consumption really influencing broadband. They're only another way to extort more money out of the user. You can put a cap on something, and it doesn't necessarily change their behavior or change the bandwidth issues that region might be having, but they're not really investing in improving that bandwidth. And it's funny that we don't typically see Comcast engaging in that kind of business practice where there's actual competition. So if there's a Google Fiber in a neighborhood, no one's playing with caps or restrictions or anything like that. Instead, you'll see AT&T also going, oh yeah, we've got fiber too. Yeah. Hey, look at that. Funny, you don't have fiber in Los Angeles for the most part. There are a couple blocks in downtown LA where you can get AT&T fiber. Where's the rest of it? Or a bunch of other comments here too. Wow, there are a lot of comments on this. From Sherrill, here's hoping my country's newest minister of tech will have a discussion on net neutrality. And I wouldn't wait for them to have that discussion. Instead, I would try and find those groups, those advocacy groups that are trying to force the discussion. From Gansy Tech Nerd, every politician is funded for campaigns by such lobbyists, so corruption is seeded even at the nascent level of politics. Completely agree. From Chad Lynch, I'm in Jamaica and I've written letters and signed all the petitions for net neutrality in the United States. I absolutely appreciate your support on this issue. So from Haniko, any one word to briefly explain the biggest threat coming to non-geeks for net neutrality. And for me, there's no one word, but I think you can sum it up. Do you want to pay more for less? That's essentially what breaking net neutrality is going to mean. Do you want to pay more for less? Because costs are going to rise, services are going to be throttled. You have to continue paying. Do you want to pay more for less? From Kyle Ruggles, great advocate. I've been following her. I'm a big fan of Elizabeth Warren. Her consumer protection, especially, like I said, in the financial sector, has been very admirable. I just want us to have a few more voices, a few better voices to talk about technology. I think she's probably a passionate advocate for this, but I want more science in that discussion. I want more facts in that discussion, because right now you can kind of say, well, I've got a feeling that it's going to be better for businesses and that's better for America. And you're like, well, you can't fight that feeling unless you have the real rational data to suggest that that's not what conservatives are claiming will happen is not actually what will happen. From Gansy Tech Nerd, FUP, fair usage policy, reducing speed drastically after 100 gigabytes of data consumed for a month. Yeah, I understand why certain schemes like that are necessary for cell phones, especially right now. Like, I'm on AT&T and they are not doing well in the valley right now. My download speeds look fine when I run a speed test, and then I'll actually try and use the service, and they're for crap. But you know, it is what it is. So, oh, guys, yeah, we probably have another troll in there because I'm talking about net neutrality. I got a lot of people that come out of the woodwork, whether or not we're fighting for privacy or anything like that. I have zero faith in the current conservative discussion about the benefit for businesses. If you care about competition, and you should care about competition, then you should not be voting conservative right now. Right now, a vote for a conservative vote means you are for the current infrastructure and the current top winners. That's what it means. That's not conservative. That's the current GOP. That's current Republican politics. If we were going to get back to conservative politics, like Goldwater economic policy politics, pre-Ronald Reagan conservative politics, then I think a lot more people, Richard Nixon style conservative politics, then I think right now Title II would probably be viewed as a necessary evil. Something that we need to enact now to help a pendulum swing get back to more competition at the local and state level, and then we could look at deregulating from there. Right now, top-down regulation does nothing to help improve the situation for competition. It only will reduce competition while increasing prices. Now, if we could get at those state laws which prevent competing ISPs, you know, whenever someone wants to make a publicly funded broadband initiative or another company wants to start laying fiber in a certain area, Comcast goes and sues them. And they have the support of local governments because they helped lobby for that and they helped write those state laws which prevent that competition. If you're concerned about net neutrality, the best way to fix that is to get rid of those state laws, deregulating at the local level to improve the competitive space for other companies to walk in. But we don't hear conservatives talking about that. We do hear conservatives talking about that. We don't hear Republicans talking about that. We only hear Republicans talking about making sure the current winners just keep winning. And that's not conservative. That's not competition. That's anti-competition. You have to be pro-oligopoly or monopoly for that to be your stance. And that's the GOP right now. So we need to start messing them up. All right, so from Kyle Ruggles, Kyle Netherwood, and Sherrill, we should wrap up. Start talking about the G7. I'm hitting that 2-hour point here soon, and I think we'd all have a lot more fun wrapping up this podcast, talking about a phone. Hit me, guys. What is it that you've been wanting to know about the G7? I've been using it for a couple weeks. I've got a lot of thoughts to share already, but I need to get through the camera review before I feel I can produce a good phone review, because that's just kind of the way that I always use these gadgets. As that little bit of personal promotion and housekeeping, I did last week release the audio review. Let me log back in here. So I did release the audio review for the G7. It's a 19-minute video. I talked more about the speaker and headphone performance on the LG G7 than most people will spend on the entire phone. So I'm going to go back into a screen share here real quick. I'm just going to let this play over me talking about it for a little bit. It's really good. It's very good. But again, this is sort of the current trend. I'm going to be pushing the audio review and the camera review to my Patreon page, where this content is properly being supported. And even though I'm not making a grip of money on Patreon, I can handily say I'm coming really close to matching what I'm making on YouTube. So this seems to me to be the correct course of action. The specialty videos I'm going to be keeping under this paywall, and then the general review videos I'll be releasing publicly, and everyone can check those out. So let me scroll back up here. I do have some questions coming in. I should start with the pricing. So there was a story that broke that pricing for the G7 on T-Mobile is going to be higher than the Galaxy S9. And people started acting like that was something bad or something shocking. This phone brings some benefits that kind of warrant that. First of all, the smaller Galaxy S9 only has one camera sensor, whereas this has two. That, for me, is worth the $30 price bump all by itself. Like, that, I'm good. I'm good paying the extra right there. I would also say that the quad DAC that's built into this phone that was pulled from the V series phones is another differentiator that warrants the price increase. So we're in the same ballpark. A Galaxy S9 on T-Mobile is like $720. The LG G7 is $750. That's not shocking to me, and I don't believe this geeky, nerdy undies in a twist crybaby response that somehow, for some reason, LG always has to be cheaper than Samsung, and that's the only way they can compete. I didn't really think that the Galaxy S9 was any incredible improvement over the Galaxy S8, versus the G7 so far has been a noticeable and a more substantial update over the G6 for all of these techie things that we say we care about. From Goran Petrovic, LG Q7. It's a mid-range, hi-fi audio, IP68 AI camera, full view display. Interesting change with the new Q series. I haven't played with any Q, so I really do want to check some of that stuff out. From Fat Produce, do you feel it is very close in experience to the V30 or measurably better so far? So overall, it's a baby V. That's all I really want. I want this division between the V series phones and the G series phones to go away. I don't think LG should have two different phones with different feature sets. The V showed us the right way for LG to make a phone, and I think the G can capitalize on that. This next one from Kyle Ruggles. Is Daydream on a phone even a thing now? And it has the same chipset as the S9 and OnePlus 6, but only does 4K at 30 frames per second. So, Daydream, so far this phone is not Daydream compatible because it's an LCD screen. And for whatever reason, we don't see refresh rates and everything. And this makes me sad because I'd much rather see VR, Daydream VR, from a phone with this quad pixel display. So for AMOLED screens, they're all mostly using a pentile subpixel arrangement. Instead of each pixel having a red, a green, and a blue subpixel, they're all spread out in a different format so that you have fewer individual dots to make up each real full pixel. When you put that in a VR headset, the lenses magnify that, where you can really see that screen door effect of the crisscrossing subpixels. And I think a proper RGB stripe would look a lot better. So that's kind of a bummer. So one of the things is the G7 is still on pre-release software, but I don't think the G7 is going to get 4K at 60 frames per second or super fast slow motion video recording. I think they're going to restrict that. That will be one of the features that hopefully we'll see in a V40 as a differentiator, like moving up and improving that, even though the chipset should be able to support it. And one of the things might be that the camera sensor might not be able to clear information at that data rate at a high quality as quickly. I don't know. I don't know what the specs on that camera sensor might impede. So that could be one issue that's preventing, the LG made a decision. Some of it might be based on cost savings. I don't know. But yeah, we don't have 4K at 60 frames per second. We don't have 1080p at 120 frames per second. Slow motion video is only at 720. So those are a couple bummers on the phone if those were features that you were really wanting to play with. But the overall effect of using the phone, it's still been a multimedia powerhouse in the same way that I like the V. So it hasn't necessarily hurt my impression of the phone. And I'm very curious. Like, I want to play with a phone at 4K 60 and then record my full camera review at 4K 60 just to see what that feels and looks like. Does it support Quick Charge 3? Also, does your hand vibrate when the volume goes up to 11? So I talk about that in the audio review. There is a speaker resonance chamber on the back of the phone, and it's no joke. It's legit cool. I have a couple samples of what this thing sounds like out in the air, and I think we have a contender for the best sounding phone of the year. And it does support Quick Charge 3, although I haven't done my time tests yet. I need to run the battery down a little bit more over this week and really measure time, how fastly it recharge, how quickly it'll recharge. From Heniko, interested if G7 goes full out on audio, what will become of the V series? That's what I want. I want the G and the V to basically be the same phone. So I'm hoping that the next V series will also have the speaker resonance chamber. I don't want that to be a divided feature between the G and the V. I think they should just be the same phone. Think Galaxy S9 and Galaxy S9 Plus. G7, V40 should be exactly the same device as near as they can, with a few simple changes like screen size and battery size. That should be the major change. So from Ruari, how does the camera compare to the P20 Pro? This thing is insane. Took it when I went to see the Rolling Stones the other day. It was incredible, both the camera and the gig. I'd imagine the Rolling Stones still put on a kick-ass show. I will be getting a P20 Pro soon. I haven't had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with the P20 Pro yet. I won't have it for very long. So unfortunately, I probably won't be doing a full review on the P20 Pro, but I will be doing a camera and an audio review on the P20 Pro, available on my Patreon, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. From Aditya, not the G7, but rather the G6, how has the phone aged? Just to get an approximate idea of how it will be a year down the line. Unfortunately, I don't think the G6 has aged as well as it could have because it was using an older chipset. So that Qualcomm 821 is starting to show some issues with some of the more advanced apps and services that are coming out. And that's one thing which has kept me, my personal SIM card is still in my V30. The 835, the Qualcomm 835 versus the 821 has aged really well over successive months. Whereas the 821 already felt like that minor step back. Now, the overall phone build, I like the G6 better than the V30 and the G7. I really wish that we still had a perfectly flat front face. It makes it easier for screen protectors. I'm on my third busted screen protector from my V30 just because none of them line up well. I'm talking to Whitestone Dome about a screen protector for the G7, so hopefully I can play with that. I really wish that we weren't so obsessed with minimizing bezels and making phones ultra skinny for no good reason, because I think the G6 feels like a better phone in the hand. But that's just me. From, I don't know what that's in relation to. From Ganzi Tech Nerd, why is the difference between the G series and V series disappearing, which is LG's flagship, actually very confusing? I don't think it needs to be confusing. Guys, seriously. Don't stop. This is all just branding. This is all just a sticker on the box. Stop thinking about these phones being different devices. It would be like if Apple put out an iPhone 7 at the beginning of the year and an iPhone 7 Plus at the end of the year. They're not different phones. They're of the same line. And this, to me, I think is one of the biggest benefits of what LG is doing right now, is minimizing some of those differences. Imagine if we still had a G series that was all about modular and a V series that was all about like high-end multimedia. That would be way harder for one company to support those types of stark differences between two different flagship devices. Get rid of that. Make it all one platform. You have an LG V30 and an LG V30 Mini, if that helps you feel better. Or an LG G7 and an LG G7 Plus, if that makes you feel better. This is a good thing. It's a good thing. It's good. Trust me. It's much better. Some talk about telephoto lenses. I still think the wide lens is the better fit for what's going on. Hold on. The thing that I like about LG phones, and I'm going to be talking about this more in my full camera review, and it's going to take me just a minute to find this shot because I want to make sure I get the right one. And I'm going to share this in the stream. So, LG is catching some flack because they are still using a 1/3 inch camera sensor, which is a little bit smaller.
And I am super excited about the P20 Pro moving up to a larger image sensor. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this is a deal breaker for the G7. Again, we don't want to just get hung up on specs. We actually want to apply that to real world usage. So zoom is something that I think is kind of interesting, and I'll be curious to see how Huawei has done this with the P20 Pro. Because if you're using zoom on a Note or an iPhone, then at night, you're not really using the zoom sensor. You're using the main sensor for a lot of your zooming. As soon as light gets low, the zoom sensor on a lot of these phones is a smaller aperture, smaller sensor with a smaller aperture. So it's worse in low light. So what the phone does is it just blows up the image from the main sensor. Well, you could just do that from the main sensor, and that's why I really like LG's approach, because you have the wide-angle sensor, you have the normal sensor, and then in mixed light conditions, indoor lighting conditions, and dark conditions, you're using the main sensor for zoom anyway. So this was taken during my night shots with the G7 last night. So this is a shot from the main sensor, fully zoomed in. I should probably also show the photo. Hold on, let me email what the full street looks like. I have to find that too. I did not prepare this as being part of my discussion today, so apologies for those of you listening, because you don't even get to see any of this, and I'm just rambling on about this stuff. So that'll be in my email here in just a second. So this is fully zoomed in. One of the benefits of this smaller sensor is that LG has fitted it with a much higher quality lens element. So you actually do preserve clarity and detail surprisingly well. So that zoom does its job really well for it not having a zoom sensor on the phone. So pros and cons, I wouldn't be too upset about not having that zoom sensor, but I do miss having the wide angle when I'm on another phone. That to me is kind of a bummer. From Haniko, main concern for LG's, what about software updates still slower than Samsung? Yup. I do believe you are still making a compromise with LG devices getting timely updates and patches and bug fixes. The situation's gotten a little bit better on my V30. I hope it will be better on the G7, but my G7 is pre-release, so I will not be able to comment on that just yet. But that's kind of where I'm hoping to end up. From Kyle Ruggles, do we need it? Probably not. I don't even have a 4K TV yet. And you guys know what I'm going to say to that is 4K content from a phone looks way better on 1080p displays than 1080p content from a phone. 4K content from a phone, once it's squished to 1080p, is truer 1080p than what you get from that device. Again, once you start talking about color values, and Kyle, you should know this, color values in 1080p video, in smartphone video, they compress your color channel. So you get a full resolution luminance channel, but you don't get full resolution color channels. So you squish that 4K image to 1080p and you do get full 1080p color channels. So that's how you should do it. Hold on one second. Let me show. So this is. Let me just download these here real quick. I'm sorry, guys. This whole camera demonstration is becoming a shit show. I said I didn't plan on this being a part of this broadcast. But let me put the. Nope. Stop it, computer. Come on. All right. Let me put this in here. And this in here. Okay, so this is the normal shot. So I'm across the street from Crave Sushi and this Solo sign, and then this is the full zoom coming in. When you can see that kind of clarity, detail, I mean, this is sharpened like crazy. We still have some of these low light issues with LG phones and the textured pattern on the wall behind it. But when you see like how much information is retained and all of these tiny little details, like the street number in the awning above the door is perfectly readable. This is from a quick handheld shot. I didn't have this on a tripod or anything. I think this is admirable zooming performance. Again, the wide shot where I'm across the intersection and across the street from this restaurant, zoom it in. I think that looks great. And I think a large part of that is LG has a crazy high quality lens element on the G7, just like they did on the V30. So I think that's pretty neat. Let me scroll back down through some of these. From Rafa, why hasn't DxOMark given OnePlus a rating ever on its new metric? I have no idea. You'd have to ask DxO. From Fat Produce, I love Huawei's zoom solution on my Mate 9. That software crop zoom, it works really well. Again, it's sort of cribbed from the Lumia. The Lumia 1020 especially was the king of crop zoom to utilize all of the data and all of the sensor advantages. So, more of that. And I think that's a lot of what they're doing with the P20 Pro. From Sherrill, can you show a side-by-side with the Honor 10 just as a comparison? I might be doing that for a future video, but it's already taken me long enough just to show 2 photos from the G7 in this podcast. Let's see. From Kyle Ruggles, 4K 60 frames per second, he means. He still wants 4K future-proofing. Yeah, definitely. So again, I was making fun of Kyle for not wanting 4K because he doesn't have a 4K TV, but he knows. He knows what's up. From Gansey Tech Nerd. I hate the fact that smartphones even have an aperture for such minuscule cameras and sensors. Remove aperture and give control of the shutter speed in manual mode. I don't think Gansey, there isn't, as far as I know, the Galaxy S9 is the only phone that has any kind of adjustable aperture. I don't necessarily know what you mean there by having, I guess I just don't, I'm not sure what you mean. And so, Rafa, I did reply to one of your comments, but then you started getting obnoxious. So we're just going to mute that out there. So, from Fat Produce, I've seen that sushi place in so many of your videos. I want to try it now. I haven't even tried it yet. It's across the street from an In-N-Out Burger, and I'm a burger and fries kind of guy. I loves me some sushi, but when I'm doing those camera tests, it's everything I can do to just not pile on another double-double. So yeah. One last question here from FE1538C. The G7 battery has been doing me just fine. It's an all-day performer. It's not a marathoner. So if you want a marathoner, you really need to start looking at like a Mate 10 Pro, or a Galaxy Active. If you really want that kind of killer battery life, you've got to step up to something that actually has a larger battery, or like a Moto Play, a Moto Z Play, and then going from the Moto Z Play and then throwing on like a battery mod is insane. If you want like a week's worth of battery, that's the gig to do it with. But it's the G7 isn't designed for that. The G7 isn't built for that. It's built to compete against a Galaxy S9. And right now, in my 2 weeks impressions, and as I'm wrapping up my camera review, I think it offers a lot that puts it up against the Galaxy S9 for that slight price premium. From Soaring Phoenix, just got on one. Did we talk about G7 pricing? We did. And that to me was the main takeaway. As I don't feel like this is outside the realm. I don't think this is beyond the pale for asking a price premium over a Galaxy S9. I think the G7 offers up plenty to warrant the costs above a Galaxy S9. I don't have any problems with that recommendation. And if you care about your ears, I don't know, if you like your ears and you like high quality audio, then this is easily a phone to recommend, as I've mentioned in my full audio review available on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. From Maris M. Are phone companies getting ahead of themselves with trying to compete and putting everything forward that it will hinder them in the future? Parenthetical, nothing to differentiate, end parenthetical. I don't think so. I actually don't think that's the situation. I don't think that's the problem. I think we've actually maximized what we can do with the current smartphone metaphor. This glowing rectangle, what lives in your hand, really hasn't changed substantially IMO since the Galaxy Note 4. I think since the Note 4 on, we've been seeing iterative improvements with some consumer compromises. Like we get a rated water resistance, an IP rating, an actual rating for how well the phone can survive getting splashed or being submerged, but that came at the expense of replaceable batteries. You know, faster charging, awesome, wireless charging, great, but there are still times where a user accessible battery would be a very nice feature to have. Cameras have gotten better, but I can still shoot with a Galaxy Note 4 and end up with incredible content. Like it's still performing today, and it's definitely not as good as a current phone of today, but you would be really hard pressed shooting in good daylight conditions to look at Galaxy Note 4 footage and go, oh, well, that's just not that. Yeah, that's unacceptable. You would be hard pressed to really see the differences in good light. Low light, that's another issue. But again, these types of iterative improvements, I think, kind of point to the fact that we're quickly approaching the post-smartphone world, that smartphones are a commodity. And I don't believe that companies are really pushing the boundaries on what they can do to compete. Instead, I think everyone's kind of playing it safe until whatever new paradigm arrives, from voice assistants and voice actions to augmented reality and VR and all of these other buzz termy things. Now it's kind of like throwing spaghetti until something sticks, right? Throwing spaghetti at the wall. Once something does stick, then I think we're going to see this rapid push towards making these just the modem that lives in your pocket. So this is going to be the access, the radio, the modem. And it's going to connect to a bunch of other things: your car, your headset, your watch, your polar chest strap, the sensors in your shoes, the fibers in your pants and compression gear. And all of that's going to be a full personal area network, which is fed by this, but we won't be looking at this for every single little interaction that we have with our data and services. So, let me scroll through this from... Let me just go through these last couple comments here, and then I think we got to bounce, guys. Yep, I'm over 2 hours. Woohoo! Go podcast. Some people talking about status symbols, and again, I question why, when we're spending $1,000 on phones, this isn't really a lifestyle. Like, no one cares. You see someone pull out an iPhone 10 and nobody cares. You see someone pull out a Galaxy Note and nobody cares. It's not the conversation piece. It's not the watch or the ring or the necklace that it used to be. From Haniko Martin, what is the next big thing next year for phones? This year is the notch, right? I don't know. I think the end of the year, we're going to see under the glass fingerprint sensors. Like, we'll probably see one on the next Note. I really hope we see some of those Vivo concepts where the entire bottom section of your phone is a fingerprint sensor. I think we're going to see the continued trend there. Unfortunately, notches are probably going to stay because we have this fetish for minimizing bezels, which is dumb. But we'll probably see more software stuff. Again, I think we see very little software, which is truly maximizing the hardware potential of what these phones can do. So gestures, AR features, AI features, I think that's really going to be the next year of smartphone development, is going to be services side, not hardware side. From Soaring Phoenix, would have preferred my LG V30 to be a bit smaller, though. Do you think LG will ever make a small form factor phone? I don't think so. I think the G7 sort of represents the... I'm going to pull my V30 out of my case here, sorry. My broken screen protector is scraping all around. So, if I hold up... Here, let me put it closer to where my face was. They're almost the same size now, the G and the V. So I think the next V series phone will probably be a little bit taller than the current G7. I think that's kind of what they're going for. I think that's their game right now. If you want a small form factor phone, I still like Sony. My Xperia XZ1 Compact is still a beast of a little Mighty Mouse phone. From Craig Duncanson, next year will be foldable phones, perhaps. And I'm not excited by foldable phones in the slightest. I think they bring so many more problems than they solve. Durability, battery, user interface. Is Android even smart enough to know what to do with multiple displays? Because it's currently not. If you pick up an Axon M, Android has no idea what to do with a changing screen space setup. So I just don't think that foldable really means much. Instead, I just like to see smarter screen sharing. You know, like if I plug it into a TV, I like what Huawei does, where it makes it more of a desktop operating system. Or I could plug it into a portable monitor and have, like a workspace that I could send apps to. Like stuff like that, I think would be a much bigger benefit to the phone that lives in our pocket than making it foldable. I just don't get. I just don't get what that fix is. From Goran Petrovic, is it true that DACs on the V30 were engaged only on headphones with 50 ohms impedance and more, and does the G7 do the same? There is so much misconception about what LG's Quad DAC does and doesn't do. If you want the full scoop, you really want to know what that thing's doing, I explain that in my Patreon video. But the Hi-Fi DAC functions when it's turned on. You get a higher quality audio representation when the DAC is on, regardless of what headphones or speaker line is connected to it. If you want more, patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. So, I'm gonna bounce this out because I'm getting a lot of now sort of repeated questions and some stuff too. This is the first podcast where I've had to mute a couple people, guys. So good times. I think, our little show here is growing. Net neutrality topics always bring out the best in us, and a couple people getting into some snarkiness about phone reviews and stuff too. So always a fun time. Folks, just to wrap up that last bit of housekeeping, as I mentioned before, if you'd like to continue these deep dives and go with me on really getting into the nitty gritty on camera performance, on audio performance, some of that really specialty benchmarking work, please join me over on patreon.com/SomeGadgetGuy. The G7 audio review is out. I'll be working on the camera review over the next couple days, hopefully have that out at the end of the week. And that's also where the ad-free version of this podcast is going to go. So if you're subscribed to the main feed, the one that you can click on SomeGadgetGuy.com, that version of this podcast is going to have ads associated. If you want to get rid of those ads, we are getting closer to unlocking that perk on Patreon. And then that will be your source for future podcasts and discussions. And I appreciate all the support over there because we've been getting some great comments. It's a really fun little community putting it together. And like I said, even with only a handful of people supporting that Patreon, I'm almost matching what I make on YouTube. So YouTube has not been a good source for me to continue producing and getting fairly compensated for my work. And that's in that regard. So thanks so much for everybody joining the chat, people watching on the Twitch, on the Periscope, on the YouTubes. I'll be back next week with another Monday morning tech chat show. You know where to find me around the internet as @SomeGadgetGuy, and I will catch you all on the next podcast.